what they were saying was true, which wasn't. And they had to say that all the data was lost. And it's just impossible for all much data to be lost. Number 15, the moon has a breathable atmosphere, as Howard Menger says in his book. So why did the astronauts have to wear spacesuits? Number 16, mountains in the background of several alleged moon landings to different areas show the identical moon background in the back. They used the same set, they didn't change them. Number 17, NASA claims the Apollo 11 crew splashed down safely at 12:50 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on July 24th, about 900 miles southwest of Hawaii in the North Pacific Ocean. A passenger airline passenger claims he saw something being pushed out of a military cargo jet that had 3 parachutes, which might have been his Apollo mission. But in addition, when this Apollo command module re-entered, it was like 5,000 degrees until about when the parachutes opened and landed on the ocean. And when you look at this thing splash down, there's no steam coming up. It's just like it normally. And when you see the astronauts getting out of the helicopter that allegedly picked them up from the command module and took them to the aircraft carrier, you can see when they walk down the steps from the helicopter to the flight deck of the aircraft carrier, they just walk normally, you know, they just tripped on down the stairs like they hadn't been lying on their back for 8 days.
Right.
Let's see, several photos from the mission tonight. Yes, went over that. That's most of that. In addition, okay, now I've talked about the moon and I talked about the solar system and how big it is, 40 planets. And the moon was made inside Jupiter 38 million years ago, and it's actually kind of a spaceship. And it was towed to Earth about 50 million years ago, and at the end of the Ice Age. And it's orbited Earth, and they use it as, there's a holding facilities, laboratories, place to hospitals, or rooms where abductees can be put on, where they do all kinds of things. They give us different upgrades. They do all kinds of things which we're not allowed to remember. But what's interesting is that my whole family has been subject to all this stuff. And my grandson, who's now, I think 21 or close to it, he came in running into my den one day and says, Grandpa, I just went to the moon. I said, really? What was it like? What happened? He said, well, I was at my treehouse with my friends and the atmosphere turned green. He said, and then he said I was knocked out, but I just woke up in a laboratory lying on a gurney, and this alien was working on me. And I said, tell me about what was he using? And he said, well, he just reach up into the air and these tools that he needed would just appear. And he said, then after that was over, they brought me back here and I came into the den. Now, I asked him, I had never talked to him much about aliens or anything like that. And I said, well, what does he look like? And I showed him a bunch of photos of different types of aliens. He picked out one, which is the praying mantis type. And Allie, do you know where that picture that Damien draw of the surgeon is? It used to be around here, but I asked him to draw a picture, and it's pretty strange. But stuff like that has happened to our family all the time, and I don't have any memory of all that. So, but I'm sure it's there. Now, the next thing I want to talk to you about is the Nevada test site. All of you know that about 90 miles northwest of here is a huge, huge area with thousands of acres that they use for Nellis training, and where the different secret test sites are. One is called Groom Lake, one is called the Tonopah Test Range, and another is called Paiute Mesa. The one at Paiute Mesa was started brand new, or should be built in 1980. They finished it in 1987, and what their problem was, they needed 5,000 workers to run the secret base. It was built inside of the earth, about a mile down, and they needed to get 5,000 people up there in the morning and back at night, and without anybody knowing. Now, as you know, at the airport, Special Projects has 5 or 6 Boeing 737s painted red and white, and they take all the other workers up to Groom Lake and Tonopah. But this other secret base, they didn't want anybody to know about. So they built a subway going from 100 feet under the Luxor to the Aria, to the Bellagio, and then up to the test site. It's called a maglev subway, and it only takes about 13 minutes to go up there. And what they did, the reason they picked Bellagio is because Steve Wynn had so much extra underground parking that they could use that when they started getting really rolling in the early 90s, and then they had to build other ones because there were more people being taken up there. So they had to make a deal with the Aria to use underground, and very few people are told anything about this subway. And the original terminus on this end was at the Luxor Hotel. And the reason it was at the Luxor is because just across the street from the Luxor is Special Projects, where the 737s parked. And there are several people, not many, but several people that are allowed to go from Special Projects on the subway up to the secret test site. Now, the secret test site, the new one, is underground, about a mile underground, and 13 miles to the northwest, they built a brand new airport, much bigger than Groom Lake. It has 2 14,000-foot runways, and it has a hangar in the middle, which is divided so that one secret project can work entirely not seen by another secret project using one of the runways. And also the entire airport is built 15 feet below ground level, so that nobody with binoculars anywhere around there can see what's going on. So Kelly Johnson was the original head of the Skunk Works for Lockheed, and he's the one that in charge the building of the P-80, the U-2, the SR-71, and the beginning of the F-117A stealth fighter. And Kelly was a genius, and he retired in 1975. Allie?
Yeah.
Do you know where that map is that was in my bathroom? I wanted to show him something. The map of
The
Nevada.
gigantic one?
The map of Nevada.
Affirmative. Stand by.
Kelly Johnson retired in 1975, and in his place was a guy named Ben Rich. Ben Rich was born in the Philippines, and when he was at college age, he was sent over to Los Angeles, where he got an engineering degree from UCLA, and when he was
Yes. Oh, making sure that's the right one.
this is my map of Nevada, and I've kept track of where these subways go. This is Las Vegas, and this is Groom Lake, and this is the secret test site, and this is Tonopah test train, and this is a place called Crystal Springs, and the one that goes all the way up there, I don't know what the name of the base is, but it's just south, 44 miles south of Wendover, and that's where the black triangles fly out of. And down here, at this base here, you could see it, but what they've done is they developed holography to a statement and holography back in 1960s. But they've developed to such a fine state now that they can put anything in the air that they want. You know, the 20th anniversary is coming up on 9/11, and I've just finished 2 books talking about the NSA, and both books they were published in 2010, but they should have known. They talk in those books about the planes that crashed into the World Trade Center. There were no planes. No planes crashed into the World Trade Center or the Pentagon. They were all holograms. And those planes were 757 and 767 commercial airplanes, which all have a unit called ACARS, ACARS. And what this unit does is it collects data, what's going on right now in the airplane, and it gives position, time, altitude, and position, and it sends that data to a satellite, which sends it to the manufacturer of the airplane and the manufacturer of the engines, so that they know what's going on at all times. And when somebody since it goes through satellite, with careful hacking, we were able to find out that after the 4 alleged crashes on 9/11, all 4 of those airplanes went back to Groom Lake. So the whole thing of 9/11 was engineered by the Israelis in 1980, and the whole purpose of this, and they took 20 years to do it, was to get the United States into the Middle East to attack the 6 countries that were a threat to Israel. And by what they had to do is make some kind of disaster that the Muslims were responsible for, and get the Americans so riled up that we would send our soldiers to Iraq and Afghanistan and any place there was Muslim. But it was all BS. This was all an inside job with, if Dick Cheney wasn't at the very top, he was certainly very close to the top of this scam. And probably 100 of our top government officials hold dual American Israeli passports. And when they hold an Israeli passport, it means their sympathies go with Israel. Now, in the 90s, they started increasing the security of the test site, and the test site is As I told you, it has Groom Lake, Tonopah Range, Paiute Mesa, and then there's a whole area around that includes the atomic underground. They used to include the atomic underground testing, and it's a huge area. And since 1980, they've increased the security, so when you go to work in the morning, you're not only weighed, you have hand fingerprints, eye things that they can see from your eye when, if you're the person, and all kinds of stuff to be sure who works there. Now, in 1975, when Kelly Johnson retired, this guy who was his fair-haired boy named Ben Rich, who had come to work at Lockheed in 1953, and he was really a smart guy, and he helped a lot on the SR-71 and the U-2, and the problem was when he went to work for Lockheed and they wanted to ship them over to the Skunk Works, he had to have a top secret clearance, and unless you were born in the United States, you cannot have a top secret clearance, no matter what. So what they did is they faked his background and where he was born, and they gave him a fake name called Ben Dover, B-E-N-D-O-V-E-R. It was a joke against the American security that they had put this over on him. So anyway, Ben Rich took over in 1976. At that time, they were building the the F-117A, and the guy in charge of the F-117A for the Air Force was a guy named Robert M. Bobby Bonds, and he was really a smart guy. He used, at that time, the Skunk Works office was down in Burbank, and Ben Rich had his office there, and at one of the times that Bobby Bonds was in 1977, when he was up there in the office, he noticed a door in Ben Rich's office that had a lock that was specific to the Navy and that nobody ever used it. And since he was Air Force, he asked Ben, what's in there? And Ben said, I can't tell you, you don't have enough clearance. And Bobby Bond said, you gotta be kidding me. He said, I'm gonna use a crash axe unless you tell me what's in there. And so Ben Rich had Bobby Bond sign a bunch of NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, and let him in there. And when he walked in, here's the whole F-19 program, an airplane that's superior to F-117A, but nobody knows about this F-19. They built 64 of them, and all of them went to Israel. What they were doing is, Ben Rich was the highest ranking Mossad spy west of Mississippi, and he was working just strictly for Israel. And they built these airplanes, and the way they couldn't get money out of Congress because it would be obvious what they were doing. So what they did is a lot of the parts were similar to the F-117A, like the engines were the same, and Ben says, well, okay, since we need two engines for the 117A, let's cover our bets and get another two for spares. And they did that for all the parts that were common to between the F-19 and the F-117A. But they kept it pretty well secret until General Bond had found out their secret. So Bond never said anything about it to anybody. And in 1984, they offered him a ride in the F-19. And of course, he was pretty excited about that, getting to fly that different airplane. And at Groom Lake, they got them all fitted out for the the cockpit, and he took off towards the northwest, and then turned left down to almost Highway 95, where he started to turn back. And what they did is they gave the controls a full down control signal that made it go straight into the ground, and he crashed at almost 500 knots into Little Skull Mountain there, killed him. Now the reason they had to kill him was because they couldn't afford for anybody to know that they had built these 64 F-19s that the Air Force or the Pentagon knew nothing about, and they were all going to Israel at the expense of the taxpayer. So they had to get rid of him, and that's the way they did it. And when they made the accident report, they said General Bond had been flying a MiG-23. Now, as you know, we have one or two of every single airplane Russia has, or anybody else has for that matter, we use for testing. And there are MiG-23s, but General Bond was not flying a MiG-23, he was flying an F-19. And I told this story on Facebook about a year and a half ago, and I put there that Ben Rich was the highest ranking Southern spy west of the Mississippi, and I told the whole story about the F-19. And a year or so, a year and a half ago, a friend of mine passed away. His name was Daryl Greenmeyer. If you haven't heard the name, he was a Lockheed test pilot who was the 5th guy to fly Blackbird, and he was a good friend of mine, and we did a lot of things together. And he worked at Lockheed flying the Blackbird, knew a lot of guys there, and he passed away a year and a half ago, and he had a celebration of life down in Indio near Pond Desert. And I went there. Marilee drove me down there, and he had a banquet room with all these tables for the dinner there, and I sat close to the front door because we had to leave early because Marilee doesn't like to drive at night. So I'm sitting there, and this guy comes in that I had known for 40 years. His name was Pete Law, and he was the head of thermodynamics at the Skunk Works for 40 years. And he came over and reached to my hand. He said, "John, I want you to know there's a lot of us at Lockheed that appreciate you telling our secrets." Because they knew that Israel had taken over, but there was nothing they could do because they're not going to get their pension. So I'm going to move on. Just a couple other things. Some of you have heard of the MAX, 737 MAX 8 that killed so many people, 300 or 400 people. One was in Malaysia, and the other was in Ethiopia, and it was blamed on the angle of attack indicator, which is pure BS. And what happened is, let me see if I can't even read my own mind. What happened is, in 1996, some brains at Boeing decided to solve the hijacking problem. And what they did was, they put a second secret autopilot into the system that they could take over and fly the airplane from a remote cockpit up there at Seattle, Boeing Field, and take over an airplane so that neither the pilot of that 737 or the hijackers could take over, because the servo strength usually is at about 80 pounds, so that a pilot can overcome any accidental up, down, fore, aft, or any elevator problem. And and so he can take over and protect the airplane. But what they did is they set the servos for this secret autopilot at 140 pounds so that nobody could take over the controls, and they could, if the airplane was hijacked, they could fly it from their secret center at Boeing to some field and have the FBI ready to arrest the hijacker. Well, that was the plan, but they never had to use that incidentally. The secret autopilot went on the 757, 767, 770, and everything that Boeing made. So 2 years ago, when these airplanes started crashing, both of them were very similar in that they had a full nose down command of the controls that the pilots couldn't control. And both the Malaysia pilots and both the Ethiopian pilots experienced the same thing. And Boeing tried to say, well, they just weren't trained enough, well enough to know how this all works. Well, that was BS. What happened was a secret cabal, and I say Zionist, I'm sure Zionist, but a secret cabal wanted to get rid of certain people, and the way they did it was they found out how to hack into the satellite and send a signal to the airplane that their enemy was on and give a full nose down command to get rid of the enemy. Now, you think they killed 200 people just for one? Yeah, that's the way they think. That's what they did. And so, as you know, the MAX 8 has been certified for flight again, and I'm just waiting for the next accident to happen. Now, Airbus did the same thing, and there's been several accidents. Actually, there's been 14 accidents of major airplanes that have had this problem of full nose down command. And what it is this secret Zionist cabal sending a satellite signal to the airplane to kill one person they don't like. I told you about this, the size of the universe. There was no Big Bang. That's just bullshit. The universe has been here forever and ever. Not only is the universe, but there's billions of civilizations out there, trillions of them, not only in this universe, but there are other universes out there. It's so big that there's not even a way to try and tell you how big it's going on out there. So it's just mantras. So there's no such thing as a Big Bang. It didn't start 17 billion years ago, or whatever they say. It's all BS. So one couple months told you about the World Trade Center, and the biggest secret, I showed you the subways, and now one more thing I wanted to tell you before I tell you the final thing is, about 30 years ago, the Navy found out that the 7 western states of the United States float on a geographical plate on the Pacific Ocean, so that the Pacific Ocean actually goes all the way to Colorado underground. And the way I found this out is I used to drive a lot to Reno to see my folks, and every time I went through Hawthorne, Nevada, there's a big blue sign that said U.S. Naval Undersea Warfare Center. And I'm thinking, in the middle of the desert, how could there be a warfare center, submarine warfare center in the middle of the desert? I mean, there's a lake there, and Walker Lake is 100 feet deep, and 50 miles long, but certainly want to get a submarine into there. And finally I found out what was going on, and that was that they have an elevator that goes from the Navy buildings there on the edge of Walker Lake. It's 30 feet in diameter, and it goes down 3,400 feet which is exactly the distance that Hawthorne is above sea level. And it connects with the Pacific Ocean. So the submarines, nuclear submarines, come in, there's two entrances, one at Monterey Bay and one at Malibu. And with these canyons, they can follow and get into this under the Pacific Ocean and go anywhere they want. They can go to any of the under 7 states. They can go up to Idaho. They can go to Colorado as well. They went to China Lake. They go to Groom Lake. They can go anywhere they want. But the reason they went to Hawthorne is because Hawthorne is forever has a secret facility inside the mountains of Northwest for making all the really high-tech secret weapons for submarines, missiles, bombs, all kinds of stuff. And what would they have to do is, after it was made, they'd have to sneak it out of Hawthorne up to Reno and over to San Francisco to the Navy base there, or down to Hawthorne, to Las Vegas, and to San Diego, where the main submarine base is. And of course, that was really risky because there was so much problem, so much chance that they could find out what they were doing. So they found out they could just dig this elevator, and it went down 3,400 feet. And now, to get all their secret stuff, all they have to do is make the submarine go into Monterey Bay, into one of these canyons, and they can access the Pacific Ocean and go all the way to Hawthorne. And under Hawthorne, there's a huge submarine bay there for 3 or 4, 5, 6 nuclear submarines, and that's where they get all their secret munitions and ballistic missiles and stuff like that. And one more quick thing, we've all heard of Fukushima and the problems that it caused. What happened is 4 nuclear reactors blew up of the 50 nuclear reactors that Japan had. And what happened is 6 years ago, Japan put out a contract for the security to guard the security of those 50 nuclear generators. And several people bid on it, and one entity that did bid on it was a company in Israel. And Israel won the contract, and they were in charge of all the nuclear facilities in Japan. At the same time, they found out that Japan had a secret agreement with Iran to supply them with high-grade plutonium they could use for an atomic bomb. Well, Israel was so pissed off at this that they decided to take care of Japan, and what they did was, first of all, they got the contract for the safety of the generators, and then they had a submarine with atomic bomb 100 miles northeast of Fukushima, and they waited for a minor earthquake, and they set off that atomic bomb, which sent up a tidal wave, or part of a tidal wave, to the shoreline at Fukushima, and then they shut off the safety guards for the nuclear generators. And that's what happened, is they all those generators blew themselves up, and it was because they had taken the safety guards off those generators. And the problems are very serious and go on and on and on, but nobody wants to talk about it. But that was Israel. That's what they did, and that was paying Japan back for trying to give Iran the nuclear stuff. So I think that's about all. You want any more? If you have any questions, I'll take one question from each person, and then I gotta take a nap. Questions? No questions? Wow, this is great.
I'm ready if no one else.
Go.
I'm curious about, do you think that there's going to be a false flag in the near future having to do with off-planet beings? I'm especially concerned with it being in Las Vegas, but what are your thoughts on that?
I couldn't hear. What did he say?
Is it going to be a false flag event in Las Vegas?
Well,
Like a false alien, like a
Yeah.
false alien attack.
that I don't know. I know that martial law was declared on January 21st, and the military is going to be taking over pretty soon. I don't know what they're waiting for, but I'm sure it's going to happen pretty soon. And it was the support of Trump.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you think the driving forces of evil, if we can just keep it simple that way, do you think they're generated by off-planet beings or by our own nature, the human nature?
What do you think?
I'll say it louder, John. Do you think, would you guess that most of the problems that we have on the earth right now are generated due to off-planet beings having their own problems, and we being the fallout, we're catching the fallout of it? Or is this really just generated? Because most human beings that I know are very kind, nice people. Off the top of my head, I don't think I've ever met an evil person.
They're generating the problems. And the reason is because, first of all, none of us are from Earth. We've all lived hundreds, sometimes thousands of lives before this, over millions of years. You've lived hundreds of lives. You've lived hundreds of lives. Everybody here has lived hundreds of lives. But somewhere along the line, we've lost touch with the things that are important when you live in outer space, and that is living your life with integrity, without envy, without hate, without greed. And so, for whatever we did, we need a refresher course. And what they do is there's hundreds of planets, just like Earth, for refresher courses for people like you and me that need refreshing on living our lives with integrity, without envy, without hate, and without greed. And that's what we're doing on here. So many people say, what are we doing here anyway? We're learning how to live our lives with integrity, without envy, hate, or greed. That's why I got this t-shirt. These are for sale if anybody wants them. But my job here is to pass on this information. And I was sent here to do that. I don't know who sent me, but I do know that that's my job. So remember, when you die, about 12 seconds later, you find yourself in the fourth dimension, and it's a magnificent place. And you'll be met by whoever you believe in. If you believe in God, or believe in Jesus, or Allah, or any other 50 or 60 gods, and in my case, it's the Great Pumpkin. You gotta meet the Great Pumpkin. And they take you into a place where you get to meet some of the really good friends that you've known during your past 200 lifetimes. And you get to meet them, you get to remember about all the things you did, and it's really a joyful experience. And then after about 45 minutes of that, by the way, when Steve Jobs died, his whole family was around his bed, and 15 seconds before he technically died, he sat up in the bed and said, "Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh, wow." And what he was seeing is the fourth dimension, and they let him see it a little bit earlier. For what reason, I don't know. But that's what he was seeing. So after you get to meet all these people that you've known in your lifetime, they take you in a little room, and you have what they call a life review.